Hey, Dutch Uncle George here, and on this video I'm going to be discussing this controversy of man versus bear. And if you haven't heard about this, what I'm talking about is that somebody came up with this question for women of if you were, walking alone in the forest and you had a choice between, coming across a bear or a man, which would you choose? And a large number of women chose bear. And, I'm going to go into, the ins and outs of that in a minute, but a lot of guys lost their shit over this. Like, oh, how dare you choose? Oh, you're saying that you choose a bear. What an ignorant whore you are. I mean, they got really nasty about it. Now, let's think about this for a minute. Sure, bears are dangerous, okay? And the stat of, well, it's it's unusual for bears to attack humans. Yes, that's true, and somewhat that's where they're coming from is that the chances of being attacked by a bear are small compared to the stats on being raped or killed or assaulted by a man. And so it's you can say, well, of course, women are going to be around more men than they are bears. Fair point. But I think people are kind of missing where this is coming from, because a lot of guys, especially in the manosphere, the incel people out there, took this, as, oh, they're just man haters. They hate men. How dare they say that about men? That's the, horrible thing to say. And you're right, it is a horrible thing to say, but it's based, I think, a lot on their experiences. Women, at least I would say the majority of women who voted for the bear as their choice, they don't hate men. They're afraid of men. Now, why would they be afraid of men? Well, again, there are stats that show that things like sexual assault are pretty common. And even with guys who may seem really nice, I've heard about women being assaulted by guys that they've been out on a few dates, things were going good, they thought they were a good guy, and then something happened, the guy flipped out, either hit them or raped them or whatever. So there's this idea in the manosphere that we need to get back to traditional gender roles. And okay, I can see why some people might want that. Things have changed, and I think we need to change with them, but okay. But I think they have kind of this fantasy of what those traditional gender roles were. And there seems to be this idea that, back before there were a lot of women in the workplace and that sort of thing, that women were, completely submissive and subservient to their husbands and their boyfriends and that sort of thing. That was never really a thing. Sure, there are some people, women and men, who tend to be very submissive and would like to have a situation where they were subservient to their partner. It can be just kind of for general life purposes. It goes also into a kink in some cases, but it's the exception, not the rule. Even when women were very dependent in terms of finances on men, they weren't really submissive and subservient. If you see any television programs from, say, back in the 50s, they're not around that much, but when I was a kid, you'd see reruns of things like I Love Lucy. And Lucy was hardly a submissive, subservient wife to Ricky. She was nuts, as was Ricky, but she wasn't just anything you say, Ricky. No, that's not the way it works. Women have never been submissive and subservient as a group to men, even when they were dependent on them for, basically having a roof over their head and food to eat. They've always had independent thoughts. They've always had independent actions. And woe be the man who tried to push a stronger woman into a subservient role. That was not going to go well. But we've warped that idea of, men being the provider and protector to now men are the attackers, if not physically attacking, certainly in a verbal way. When a woman says something they don't like or that they disagree with, they'll go all in on the, you ignorant whore, Jane, you ignorant slut, as from the old Saturday Night Live weekend update. But this is the thing. If you want to have good relationships with women, if you want to have sexual relationships with women, you can't go flying off the handle just because they say something you don't like or disagree with. It's a point of contention that you can discuss. It's a point of disagreement that may or may not be a deal breaker, but you can communicate about it without getting all rageful. And that's the other thing. Women may not necessarily choose the bear because they think that they're more likely to get physically attacked or injured by a man, but they might get attacked in other ways. So, a guy, let's say that, the man and woman come together in the forest and the man says, hey, baby, want to go fuck? Or, hey, baby, let's go have coffee or have dinner with me. And she's like, no, I appreciate the offer, but thanks, but no. And then he goes freaking off on her saying what a terrible slut she is and what a whore she is. She's probably fucking all these other guys. And yet you won't go out with me. Why? Because I don't have lots of money. And they bring all their issues into this with, this poor woman that they just met who knows nothing about them. So you got to keep this in mind. And if you want women to start answering they'd prefer to meet the man in the forest, well, then not only do you need to start behaving better, but you need to call out guys on their bad behavior. If you got people that start joking about sexual assault and stuff like that, that ain't cool. You need to shut it down, say something, or just leave the situation so that they get the idea that you're not on board with it. And if we all start behaving better, then you'll start hearing answers you like a whole lot better. So that's my take on the man versus bear thing. And, if you want to have good relationships with women, you need to just up your game a little bit. Learn to control your temper, learn to communicate. Don't be a rage monster just because they said something you don't like. And certainly don't go physically assaulting somebody just because they don't do what you want them to do. So I don't think saying that is probably going to change much, but just think about, why would a woman choose the bear? It's because they're afraid of men, and they're afraid of men because we're becoming more and more and more rageful and angry and just out and out attacking women. Attacking women for hating men when we're the ones, that are using the hateful behavior against them. So think about it. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you can relax a little bit if the next time you hear some woman say she'd choose the bear. And, if this struck a chord with you, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. That's it for this one. Thank you for watching.